Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Super Anime Bros podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rosario, joined by my brother, Angelo. And today we're going to talk about something we love.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to do our first set of deep dives.
Oh, baby.
And the first two shows we picked, as we mentioned last week, is A Sign of Affection and Orange.
Yeah, super excited to be able to actually, really talk about some of these shows for an extended period of time. Dive into some of the characters, and I think, most importantly, talk about what the shows mean to us. These are definitely higher up on our list, as our count was really just the first 10 of 50. But I think, they both still mean a lot to us, and it'll be great to talk about. With that, I do want to say that we're going to spoil, everything from the show for the most part. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that pretty much everything will probably be spoiled.
Yeah, so if these are shows you ever plan to watch, maybe come back to this after you finish them. Obviously, we think both of them are pretty great, so we highly recommend them. But for things that you don't plan to watch, I would say stick around and hear what we have to say. Maybe you'll go back and want to watch them after. I think we'll get into some heavier topics today, especially with your show more than mine, Ange. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So, beware of that as well. But really, I think we can just kind of get right into it. Sound good to you?
Sounds perfect.
All right, let's rock and roll.
All right, so the first show we're going to talk about is A Sign of Affection, and that is the show that you picked for the deep dive.
Yes, indeed. So I did like a little one sentence. I actually saw that you put a one sentence descriptor in here, so I did one for mine as well. So I said, seeing the world through each other's eyes. As far as a premise or synopsis, we got this from my anime list. So it says, for hearing impaired university student Yuki Itose. Wow. Itose. Reading's hard. Silence has been a natural part of life since birth. Her world is small and isolated. She commutes to campus, interacts with her best friend Rin, and communicates through writing and text messages. A lifestyle that offers little to no change. One day during her commute, Yuki meets fellow student Itsuomi Nagi, a multilingual travel enthusiast and friend of Rin. When Itsuomi learns of Yuki's condition, he takes it in stride, moving Yuki's heart. From this one simple gesture, Yuki and Itsuomi's lives start changing day to day as they let each other into their own worlds. That's a basic outline of what the show has to offer. I think that definitely sums up the first couple episodes or so, and then kind of gives the direction that it's heading. Boy, am I bad at reading. That was really hard. That's not a good look.
Reading's hard.
It is.
Well, it's reading out loud, especially in front of a microphone. It's like you just forget how to do it. So I'll probably do just as bad, if not worse.
Nah, we'll see. But yeah, after that basic premise, I think I can add that a relationship develops between our two main characters, and we kind of take it from there. There's some love triangle aspects, some other relationships as we go. But basically, I think that I can tell the story through going through each of the characters. I think they kind of progress off of each other. So that's how I'm going to go with this. And Ange, anything you have to say or interject, any opinion that you have or feeling you may have, please share it when you feel it.
Sounds good.
So the main character, Yuki, really, really wholesome main character. So she's a deaf girl who's going to college. Most of her life, she was sheltered in schools specifically for those who are hearing impaired. So her world is really, really small, as the synopsis there explained. She's very sheltered. We don't see like a ton of her parents. I think we might see her mom, which in a situation where somebody's sheltered, I would have, of course, first think, oh, the parents really shelter them. But, that might not even be the case. But through her chance meeting with Itsuomi, she starts to discover some new feelings for the first time. Whether it's a crush or, what it ends up being ultimately in love. She has to understand these new feelings, and her world really begins to open up. you know, a relationship does bloom between the two of them. But Yuki's really, and is initially, and you know, maybe it'll get better as it goes along, but initially very uneasy in the relationship. You know, sees some people that are in Itsuomi's life, and you know, maybe assumes that they already have that role of somebody special in his life, which doesn't end up being the case. We'll get there. But you know, she doesn't fully understand what she's going through in this relationship, so you know, I think it's natural for her to not trust, you know, being in such a new situation with somebody she's just meeting and stuff like that. But she's really fascinated in expanding her worldview, expanding up from that sheltered life that she's had thus far. And I really think this is why Itsuomi is perfect as a love interest for her. He's very well traveled, travels very often. Seems to be doing like some helpful things when he travels. Looks like he's often with kids, and you know, whether that be doing like missionary work, I don't know. Who's to say? It doesn't really get into it too much. But he's very forward in their relationship, super charming. I wrote here perfect ? Meaning that he may be like a little too perfect. I don't know, you know, what foils we'll see for him down the road. But, you know, as far as a love interest goes, he checks all the boxes for her. I wrote here that he has it all, but wants Yuki. So he has this expanded world. He's got, you know, so much travel under his belt. He knows many languages, has tons of friends, has people that like him, has, you know, relationships that he could get into but doesn't. But Yuki's really what he wants, and, you know, wants to learn about her world, see the world through her eyes, so much different than his own. But in that way, he shares that want and desire with Yuki. So I think it's really, really cool to see two almost polar opposites develop a relationship. He told me this, puts forth a lot of effort in the relationship. You know, clearly Yuki doesn't have a lot of experience in dating, so he can, I mean, not to say that he does either. I don't know that it really gets into much of his past. But he definitely helps her to kind of show her how things work, and, you know, it's really great to see. Moving into a further character here, there's Woshi, I guess you'd say that. I don't remember how they said it in the show. But it's a childhood friend of Yuki's, and I find him to be a particularly interesting character, largely due to his obvious crush on Yuki.
Yes.
I think that often a childhood friend will end up being, you know, a love interest in a lot of shows, whether it be the one they end up with or not. He's super protective of Yuki, but also, like, friendly bullies her, which I think is funny. Super, super protective, though. And in that way, is kind of the opposite of Itsuomi, where Itsuomi's here to help Yuki expand her worldview, see more things, just learn about the infinity of life, all the things that there are to do and experience. Oshi kind of wants to shelter her and protect her, which, you know, comes from a place of love, I think, but probably isn't exactly what Yuki needs. Regardless of this, he waited too long in confessing his feelings. Not that he does even, I don't think. I mean, he threatens Itsuomi with, "You don't mess up or I'll take her from you," all that kinds of normal stuff. But I think that he probably assumed that he'd really be the only one for her. You know, she's living such a sheltered life, but he's always been there. Even learned sign language for her. I guess I didn't talk about that aspect of Itsuomi, is how much patience and care he's put into learning sign to communicate with Yuki. I think it's really, really cool. Obviously, he enjoys learning languages. He knows a bunch. But it's awesome to see how much effort he puts forth in that aspect of things to be able to communicate with her. He does it all very properly, whereas Uoshi, it's always very, like, quick and, like, I don't know, not as perfect, his sign language, which kind of can show like a lack of care, but also obviously he cares enough to go out and learn it. So really, really interesting character there. And then getting into some of the more side characters, there's Rin, who's Yuki's best friend. I think she's an awesome character for driving along the plot. Really, really helps Yuki in developing her initial relationship with Itsuomi. She's a crush on Kyoya, a guy that works with Itsuomi. So her and Yuki will go visit both of them, and that's great for initially opening up the door with Itsuomi for Yuki. So that's awesome. Great to see a supportive best friend. But like I said, also has that crush on Kyoya, who is Itsuomi's friend, who has a really slow-building relationship with Rin. One of the slower of the relationships shown in the show. I think it mentions that Kyoya has just gotten out of a long relationship and is kind of struggling with love in general. So where they both have feelings for each other, it doesn't immediately become a thing. And they're both going to take it slower, and I think that they're both okay with it. Ange, one thing you want to point about this character is?
He has a Jeep.
Yeah, he does.
I think that's pretty cool. They have an episode there where they go on like a little picnic / barbecue, and they ride in the Jeep, and I think that's a really cool vibe.
Yeah.
Plus, a lot of the times in like anime, and I guess largely in Japan, not everybody has cars, so I think it's pretty cool when somebody has one. He's like the cool friend.
I would agree, yeah. No, it's super cool with this Jeep. So the final two characters here are Itsuomi's friends, Emma and Shin. Emma is the character I was kind of referring to previously, has a crush on Itsuomi, and Yuki initially sees talking to him and immediately assumes, hey, maybe these two are a thing. There's even a point where Yuki's at Itsuomi's house, and Emma just comes in. She clearly has a key to his apartment or house or whatever. But she's had a crush on Itsuomi since they were in high school, and it has always been a really one-sided love. She doesn't really hide the crush at all. She's really always on top of Itsuomi. I think just kind of trying to force feed her feelings to him, which he never really shows anything in return for. Eventually, obviously, after Yuki and Itsuomi begin a relationship, she's going to have to find out. And that comes in the form of Shin having to tell her. Shin's one of their friends as well, somebody they've known since high school. And he has a secret crush on Emma. A lot of love. I don't even know if you could say love triangle, but it's like it's a weird shape in this show. But has a secret crush on Emma, which he never planned on confessing or acting on. Even I think they show in a flashback with high school, he's like, I would never feel anything for her or something like that. But that door is open for him by Itsuomi. Emma's got to learn to accept Itsuomi's feelings and the fact that they're not going to be returned, the fact that they're for someone else. So Shin, has an opportunity, and at the end of the show does confess to her, and it seems like that's going to bear some fruit going forward. We'll find out. I also wrote down here that Shin is a hairstylist. Itsuomi's hair is always dyed gray or whatever. I think it's gray or white. That's because Shin's always experimenting on him with different hair stuff. So I think that's a funny aspect of the relationship. He's a pretty cool character, to be honest. Kind of dark and gloomy, but also very genuine and pretty cool for someone that we don't get a huge amount of backstory with. So that's the basics of the characters, the basics of the show. Anything you want to add? Anything you think I forgot?
No, I really don't think you missed anything. Like you said, it's a great show. It's beautiful, and it's a good take on romance. And I do like the idea of letting somebody else into your world, even though it might be completely different.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I'll add, I probably should have said this at the start, to be honest, that this was just the first season of the show. Should it come back for more, we'd love to watch it. I know there's a lot more manga. Who knows if that'll ever get adapted into more of a show. So many of these we'll get a first season and then nothing more, but that's something we can hope to see. So I can kind of close out here and talking about a few things that I like about the show, if it's missing anything, and then finally end with what it means to me. So what I like about it is the idea of two people sharing two different worlds with each other. I think that's a really awesome idea in life. It's not your everyday simple high school love story. This is something that takes place a little later in life in college, and also with the two main characters, one being someone who travels and has gone a lot, and the other one being someone who's grown up hearing impaired her whole life and has been really sheltered, and just seeing how they can make that work and learn from each other and grow to love each other, I think is really cool. Definitely some fun comedic moments. I specifically like the relationship between Itsuomi and Oshi, and Itsuomi trying to be friends with him and Oshi like hating Itsuomi's guts. I find that pretty funny. And then finally, something that you've talked about before, and I think I mentioned this before on the podcast, this is a shoujo anime as opposed to shonen or something made for guys. This is more made for females. So generally in that kind of show, the main guy is not as dense. And Itsuomi is certainly not dense, very forward, knows what he wants. Very refreshing, giving some of the idiots that we have to watch week in and week out.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's nice to watch somebody who's not a complete fool.
For sure. So as far as if it is missing anything, I said it with Itsuomi, it might be true of both main characters. Maybe they're a little too perfect. Maybe I'm nitpicking and maybe that's stupid. But I'd really like to see, some of the things that they don't have, some of the negatives about them, see like what kind of cracks they have and how they can fill it in with each other, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I also think everything's resolved really quickly. Like in 12 episodes, we have 3 couples that form. All of like the main characters besides Oshi, the childhood friend. So pretty interesting there. But not that I need it to be a slow burn. I just feel like it could have been slowed down a little bit. And then finally, I think this definitely will need a season 2. There's more manga, so hopefully it'll get a season 2. Regardless, like I said, the main relationships are all unfolding now. So at the end of the day, if it doesn't get a season 2, everything was fairly resolved. So I guess I can't complain too much. And then in closing, what this means to me. As somebody who I would say is a sucker for love myself, I think this is a really beautiful story. I think I really share in this desire to explore someone else's world. It's not something that I've had the opportunity to do in life. So it's certainly something that I desire in life, is to experience this type of love and really open up my world completely to somebody else and see life through somebody else's eyes. We only know what we know, so to share so closely with somebody else, I think is super, super cool. And finally, I can, relate to a lot of the characters, whether it's Yuki and her inexperience with love, yet, trying to understand these complex feelings and really open up her world view. Oshi with the pain that he feels having waited and not confessed and, having to live with that. I think that's a really resounding feeling that I think a lot of people can relate to. And finally, Emma and Shin in both of their unrequited loves, one-sided loves. For Shin, obviously it turns two-sided by the end. But I think that's something we can all relate to. Maybe you have feelings that aren't returned, and that can be really painful, but you have to learn to accept it and move forward, which I think, Emma certainly embodies accepting that this love that she's had for a long time probably isn't going to be returned. So, let's move on and see what else life can offer. Life can offer. That made sense. It sounded weird in my head. But yeah, that's really all I have on the show. That was my deep dive. I hope anyone found that somewhat interesting. And do you have anything to add before we move on to yours?
I honestly think you covered it. You covered it well. Everything that I thought it was missing was a season 2, which you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure.
They did do a nice job of tying a little bow on it, so I guess it could go without a season 2, but I'd like to see how the relationship continues, because as you were saying, about wanting to see maybe some of their faults
Yeah,
I think that would show more once the relationship's formed.
for sure.
Because that seems to be a type of show that's not about the initial getting together. It's more about how they sustain the relationship and how they grow once they're already together.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. All right, well, the show you chose to talk about this week is called Orange.
Yep,
so one of you... Sorry, I mean, just talk.
You're fine.
That's what I was going to say.
So I also did like a little, kind of like a tagline. I just wrote Emotional Roller Coaster.
Yeah.
This show is a show that has a lot of ups and downs. And like you mentioned earlier, it definitely does have some heavy topics, talking more about like depression, self-harm, suicide. So if that's not something you are okay hearing about, I would recommend not listening to the rest of this. And we'll see you next week. But for everybody else, I want to talk about this show. It's a great show. And honestly, one of the first thoughts I had after rewatching it, because I did rewatch the entire thing since we recorded the last podcast.
That was impressive.
Well, we watched A Sign of Affection not too long ago. We watched Orange like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That I really criminally underrated this show.
Yeah.
This show is absolutely fantastic. It is a great story, something that is relatable, really, really caught me, and I definitely means a lot to me now that I rewatched it again too.
Heck yeah.
Now, going into the show's premise, I also pulled mine from my anime list.
Thank you,
after I saw you did it, and I'm like, ooh, this is a nice idea.
Learning from each other.
Naho Takamiya's first day of her sophomore year of high school is off to an uneasy start. After waking up late, she receives a strange letter addressed to her. However, the letter is from herself 10 years in the future. At first, Naho is skeptical of the note, but after witnessing several events described that take place, she realizes the letter is really from her 26-year-old self. The note details that Naho's future is filled with regrets, and she hopes that her younger self can correct the mistakes that she made in her past. The letter also warns her to keep a close eye on their new transfer student, Kakadu Naruse. Naho must be especially careful in making decisions involving him, as Kakadu is not around in the future. With the letter as her guide, Naho now has the power to protect Kakeru before she comes to regret it once more. So I wrote a little premise of myself too, like a shortened version. It's a group of second-year high school students receive letters from themselves 10 years in the future. Because Naho's not the only one who does, which is a spoiler, but we warned that.
Whoa, spoiler.
We warned that. We're going to get into the entire show, so there definitely will be a lot more spoilers. It's a group of 5 people and 6 counting Kakadu, and they all receive letters from themselves talking about their regrets and how they want to save Kakadu from committing suicide. I think I pretty much covered all what I just wrote down and what I just said. So they want to avoid a lot of the same mistakes, which the friends' letters do differ a little bit. When I go into more in depth about the characters, I will talk about that there. But going into the characters.
Yes, sir.
I think I want to talk about Kakadu first. Originally, I was going to talk about Naho because she's the main character. But Kakadu is the main guy who does commit suicide and is not around 10 years in the future. He's the guy they want to save.
Yeah, the reason for the story.
He has horrible depression, and the reason why is his mother killed herself on his first day of sophomore year after he went and hung out with the group of friends instead of taking her to the hospital. So he feels guilty for that every single day. All he lives with is regret because he thinks if he just didn't go out with his friends, his mom wouldn't have died. Which at the end of the day, it's not his fault. Obviously, she had things going on too, which I actually didn't remember why, what was wrong with her and why she did what she did. And you find out at the very end. But she had become like completely dependent on Kakadu and always had him around, and she felt bad for him because he had been bullied at his old school, and she just wanted to do everything she could to protect him. Even like throwing away his sports gear, not letting him join any clubs, pretty much keeping him as close to her as possible because she didn't want him to get hurt. And after he sent the text message saying, hey, I'm hanging out with my friends, you can go by yourself, she was filled with a lot of feelings, but she really felt bad, and she was just trying to get out of his way and ended up killing herself, which is never the right thing to do, but she just wanted to try to set him free of her, basically. But he doesn't really understand that. He wants to do anything he can to try to apologize her, even if that means dying too. And he does develop feelings on a good note. He falls in love with Naho, who does fall in love with him too. And that really is one of the deciding factors that they will try to use to save him. So move on to the next character is Naho. She's the main character. She's the first one you see receive the letter. And she's a very timid girl. She has a very hard time asking for what she wants and making actions, making moves, which on the first thing the letter says is don't let Kakadu come out with you guys the first day. She doesn't do anything to stop it. Whether it was because she didn't believe the letter or she just didn't make the move, was scared to. She ends up regretting that later. And her letter covers a lot of other mistakes. It's not just stuff about Kakadu. Most of the other people in the group, their letter's just about saving him. But she tries to cover a lot of her other mistakes, like not participating in a sports event. She just wants her past self to live without any regrets. So she really puts it on herself to try to fix all the mistakes she made, mainly the one not saving Kakadu and stuff like that. And eventually, later in the show, she finds out that the other people receive letters when the next guy I'm going to talk about tells her, and his name is Suwa.
Goat.
My first note with Suwa is best guy. Suwa's absolutely awesome. He also likes Naho, but this does not turn into a love triangle situation. Once he gets the letter from himself in the future, he knows what he has to do is just put his feelings aside to try to help his friend. That being said, they also cut to and from themselves 10 years in the future, and in that future, Naho is married to Suwa, and they have a child together. So he, in his future self, got to live his dreams. Now he just needs to focus on saving his friend.
Yeah.
And talking about their future selves, I don't know if you remember this. It cuts to them in the beginning. They're visiting Kakadu at his grave, and then they go and dig up their time capsules they left from high school, talking about themselves 10 years in the future. And they all read theirs like, oh, this is nothing like what happened. And they read Kakadu's, and his did not mention talking about himself at all. It was all just talking about them.
Yeah.
And that's how they found out that he did it to himself. They went those 10 years without knowing how he died. They thought it was an accident. So that's when they write their letters, and they send them back in time, which they use kind of like the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's weird. At some point in the show, in the present timeline, they talk about time travel with their teacher. I'm like, I don't remember learning that in high school, but go off. But they
Slightly
use
alternate universe.
they use one of those weird things. So they say it's a parallel universe. So even if the past changes, the future won't change.
Yeah,
They know that. They're just trying to do it to save any version of Kakadu they can. So the letters somehow do get back to them, and that's what they use to try to save him.
Yeah.
Moving on to other characters, these three are not as important, but they're still fantastic characters. The next one's Hagita. He is the comic relief, is what I put.
Yeah.
He's very, he's kind of nerdy, but he's very blunt. Like at one part, he just says, I have nothing to do, so that's why I'm not hanging out. Like, he'll just be honest. And he's also the one that brings up a really good thing I took away from the show, which was when they mess with the past, they're affecting somebody else's future. Like at one part, they correct the mistake they made when they didn't all run the relay race at the sports festival and Kakadu falls and gets hurt. Instead, they end up winning. And what Hagita says is that wasn't supposed to happen, so somebody else was supposed to win, and they affected their life now, which is something really interesting to think about. And they always talk about when they do anything with time travel, but I thought it was very insightful of him.
Certainly thoughtful.
Moving on to the next person is Azua. She is part of like the 3-girl trio with Naho. And she flirts with Hagita a lot, which I didn't remember from the first time we watched it.
Yeah.
Which is something that I wish we would have got to see more at the ending. I wish we got to see them get together in the future. But she's very cheerful. She's partially also the comic relief with Hagita. And then Takako is the other girl in the group. She's very tall, very calm, but she would do anything to protect her friends, especially Naho. So with those cast of characters, they do everything they can to save Kakadu, and they actually end up saving him at the end, spoiler alert. And what changed this time was before he was about to... Well, in the future timeline, he rode his bike into a truck on a specific night. And what they did in the present timeline is they waited at that intersection and were waiting for him to come on the bike, and they were going to try to stop him if they had not done enough already to save him. And he doesn't show up at the intersection, but he's also not at his house, so they run out to find him, and he's walking on foot. He goes to jump in front of the truck, and then he jumps away at the last second. And what changed this time was the friend group, so they really did make a difference. He didn't want to miss what kind of fun they're going to have, and he didn't want to miss times with Naho. So it really is a fantastic ending in that sense that they're able to save their friend and really take back some of their regrets. Is there anything you wanted to talk about in that regard? Anything I missed with the plot and with anything?
I don't think so, plot-wise.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about is what it means to me, which obviously the show does mean a lot. And one of the big things I wrote down is life is too short to live full of regret. And a lot of anime talk about this as living life with no regrets, and I think that's a beautiful thing you always want to try to do, because most people, I'd say all people, don't get the opportunity to write a letter to them past selves.
Yes, sir.
You don't get second chances, so it's just way too short to live full of regrets. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the sadness and the happiness, which I wrote again. It's an absolute roller coaster. Because the show, it's not just a show that's just going to make you sad, but it makes you happy too. So I also wanted to write that it can be definitely a relatable show to a lot of people, unfortunately, who deal with sadness and depression and stuff like that. And as somebody who has dealt with a lot of sadness, I understand it's so hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But fortunately, I did. And definitely my friends helped a lot with that. So I think that also talks about like the power of friendship, which I know is cheesy, but it really can save lives.
Well, that's life, baby.
And yeah, the important thing is to
Whatever
check up on your friends. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too with Kakaru is in the timeline where he does kill himself, he never wanted to be a burden on his friends. That's why he never talked to them about it, and they didn't know to ask because he's so good at playing the part of a happy, cheerful guy. So that being said, people, it's not, your friends aren't going to be burdened if you just want to talk about your feelings. If you're upset, you need to talk to somebody about it. Anybody who cares about you will do anything they can to help you. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really meaningful show in a lot of ways. Regret is something that I think everybody feels. So it's definitely relatable to see, your future self want to change some things you did in the past. And as far as like the characters go, I mean, Kakaru, yeah, I mean, you can certainly relate to a lot of the things with feeling down with life, downright depressed sometimes, and hiding it. I think I can relate to that as well, and it's not the right thing to do. You're right that don't feel like you're going to be a burden on somebody else. Life is nothing without other people around there with you. So I think that this is a show that really stresses the importance of that, and for that reason, I think it's beautiful. I also think Sue is a great character because he puts everything he desires to the side for the sake of the people around him, and I think that's really admirable. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I know you're definitely better at talking. You put things way better than I do.
I think you did a great job expressing all
to talk
that.
about all that. But yeah, I also like what you said about Sue. Sue is definitely somebody I try to be like, somebody who would just do anything to try to help my friends. But yeah, in closing, the big things to take away from the show are, it's just life is too short. I know that's kind of cheesy, but it is. It's too short to live with regret and guilt, because a lot of these characters do carry guilt. Even Sua carries guilt because he's the one who invited Kakaru to hang out with the day that his mom died.
Yeah.
Which at the end I didn't remember that. He said it's his fault, which was tough to hear. But life is just too short for that. And another big thing to think about is that your actions affect others. That you never know what somebody else is going through before you say or do something that could hurt them. You got to think about that and try to put their shoes on. And same thing when it comes to your friends. Always try to consider what they're going through, because they could be having a really tough time, and life is just so short. You never know when it's the last time you're going to see somebody you care about. So you always want to live life to the fullest and really treasure the people that you care about and make sure that they know that.
That's a fact, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
No,
all I had
well
to
said,
say.
brother.
Sorry it got a little depressing, and that I kind of lost my train of thought a lot.
No, it's okay.
Train of thought a lot. It's just something that I struggle to talk about, and I do sometimes have a very hard time talking about heavy stuff. So thank you guys for bearing with me here.
Yeah. No, I'm proud of you, brother. It's good to be able to be honest and open up about that kind of stuff. So I think that's really all we got for this week. Happy to do our first deep dive into some shows, some things that mean a lot to us. Obviously, like I said last week, recency bias plays a big role in our rankings. So I think you've defeated that this week in saying that this should be rated much higher.
Yeah, but now we're already started the list, so I can't move it up.
We can go back to a later
I'll
date.
move it up and we just talk about it again,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, we'll talk about it again. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. A little bit different than some of the last ones we've done thus far. A little more open with feelings and meaningfulness of these shows. But, at the end of the day, when we were first talking about why we wanted to do this and why we love the medium, these stories mean something to us. And I think we really expressed that tonight. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Peace.